Hello, lovely souls, and welcome back to the Awakening to Your Soul Self podcast. I have Michelle Larson here. She is an energy healer and psychic medium. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited for our conversation. So, I always like to start it with the guest introducing themselves. So, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. So, as you said, I'm Michelle Larson. I am an energy healer, psychic medium. I am a mother of two, an avid outdoorsman or outdoors woman. Um, Gosh, I just love everything about really figuring out how things work. So, watching children, like watching their wheels turn, figuring out like
Mm.
nature's rhythms. Like, it's really, I'm really called to nature. So, that's why I love to be out there. And then just have a very interesting story that I can't wait to share with you all of kind of how I got into this. But yeah, so children, mothers, it's my jam.
And I love that you dabbled on nature because nature is so vibrational. I will love to just sit out in the back porch and just close my eyes for a little bit and just feel all the different energies, whether it's the trees, the wind, the birds, and it's amazing.
It is. And it has so much to teach us in remembering versus
Yeah.
like so much to teach us, like, but it's like in just a remembering of like, the cycle of life and the rhythm that we all follow, whether we choose to or not, we all follow it.
Absolutely. So, if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your spiritual awakening. I've had many healers on here, and everybody's is different, different timeline. So, let me
Mhm.
know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy hearing people's spiritual awakenings, and what I love about all the different ways that people have spiritual awakenings is that they are unique and they're so
Yeah.
different because our souls and our paths are so different. So it really just kind of shows. It reminds me of like a birth story. When you think of mothers and their children, they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this birth with that kiddo, it checks out. This birth totally different, but that kiddo, it checks out." It reminds me of the spiritual awakening as well. So mine, I definitely was, you could say like psychic intuitive growing up, but
Mm.
nobody was talking about it and or validating anything. So I had like a small little group of friends when I was really young who like were into kind of like more like witchy stuff, but not
Mm.
really because we were in second grade. But we were like, we believed in powers and really believed in things, which, what have you. But then I started to really notice things, and kind of spent my whole life just noticing a lot, having a ton of sensory experiences without having any way to really figure out what was happening. Which
Yeah.
once my spiritual awakening came, I realized like, oh, I was just sensing spirits and energies and different beings or entities like in my space and around me. And then learning how to really be in your sovereignty and in your power around which energies you allow to interact with versus just like any and all, right? It's the empath, that scale of
Mm.
being an empath versus being in control of your gifts. So flash forward, oh gosh, I was probably like 24, I don't know. So at
Mm.
some point, somewhere in there, in my early
Yeah.
20s, bought a house with my like soon to be husband. And it was such an interesting house. Didn't notice anything when we were looking at it. But once we got into it, I was like, I feel things, I see things, like things are weird. Like,
Oh.
I don't know what's happening here. So, kind of after we got married, I had this really big health crisis as well. And then, like, started to really clean up my diet, which in hindsight, I can see that I was raising my frequency. So you're able to hold more understanding when you clean up your environment, you clean up your body, you're a stronger conduit for spirit and energy. And as that was happening, also the level of messed upness in this house like kept going up. So it wasn't like lights flickering and
Ah.
stuff, but it was really like tormenting for one of our dogs. Like her feet were getting pulled out. I'd have people standing over me when I'm sleeping. I have such goosebumps even sharing this. um
Wow.
and then it kind of this like feeling of not safe. Like I'm like, am I safe in this house? Like this is really
Mhm.
weird. And my first experience with an energy healer really like validated all of my life experiences, where she's like, whoa, okay, I hope you're sitting down. I'm like in person. I'm like laying on her table. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
flipping upside down and all of that. And she's just like, okay, here's what's happening. Your house has six portals underneath of it. You're being visited by this, like da da da. And she's like, and your whole
Mm,
life, she's like pegging these events, right? Which we've all been in some sort of psychic
yeah.
reading. We're like, how do you know these things? Right.
Right? Yeah.
So from that weird experience with my house, starting to work with an energy healer who I worked with for a very long time in clearing my house. I had home births, so it's like I'm like, do I feel
Mm.
safe here having a baby? Like things are weird. Had her come out, had her drum and clear the whole house. We tried to shut down the portals. All of that really just threw me in deep water, no life jacket. Like, hey girl, wake up and remember your gifts. That's my spiritual awakening.
That's intense.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And I love how it kind of started out childhood because, Spirit always likes to remind me that, as kids, we had imaginary friends, but they've validated for me that I wasn't just imagining them. They were like
Mm.
there with me. Um, and I love how you brought like the witchy part because, back in the day, there used to be all those witchy shows because nobody really wanted to talk about spirit and gifts and they didn't know how to. So they made shows.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I loved those shows. Like I'm like Charmed and Buffy and
Yeah.
like I forget what else there was, right? But it's like those were like couldn't get enough of those shows,
Yeah.
and really it's kind of like and the bulk of my work, which we'll get into, is working with mothers who have these spiritually gifted children. And the irony is most of the mothers are psychic and spiritually gifted in
Yeah.
and of themselves. They just may or may not know it, but they're like, there's something with this kid. Like they can see things, they can sense things, they're picking up on all these energies. What do I do with them? Right. And when we were growing up, we didn't have that. We were just like, I don't know, it didn't happen on Buffy. It's like,
Yeah. And it was too taboo to talk about,
yeah.
like if I didn't have that experience. The only experience I had was imaginary friends, but
Mhm.
I've had some other healers on the show and they're like, I couldn't tell anyone because nobody would believe me, or they would think
Mhm.
I needed to, get some help and now we can talk about it and I'm seeing more and more kids um are being open to these gifts.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
we'll
and
we'll
some of
get
that,
into that. Yeah.
yeah, some of that I feel one like the wave of children that are coming through now are they're kind of hardcore. Like they are coming through and they're like, we have our gifts online and we're not shutting them down the older we get. If anything, they get more and more loud and intense. And also the receptivity, it's like, even like oracle cards or tarot. You before, it's like when I first got into
Mhm.
this, it's like you had to go to these tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny hole in the wall shops and there'd be like five decks. And
Yeah.
now you can go to a Barnes and Noble and there's a whole section. And I'm like, whoa. So we as a collective are far more receptive to these children coming in here. So it's like,
Yeah.
the cart of the horse, but either way, we're on the buggy. We're riding through the terrain.
For sure.
Yeah.
And there's just so much more knowledge out there as we continue through these lifetimes and as these next wave of healers and starseeds come through, more information, more healing modalities just are coming and coming
Mhm.
um I don't even know I don't think any healer really knows every single healing modality. I mean, there's just so many of them, and then you just resonate with what you resonate with.
Mhm. Yeah, and I also think that's the beauty because you don't, it's kind of like you have your seasons and your times when
Yeah.
you really need that thing. Like the style of energy healing I was getting when I moved into that house is very different from the stuff I have now. But I'm working with people's energy all the time. I need different
Yeah.
healing than I can't tell who's in my room at night because they're hovering over me, right? It's like you just
Yeah.
need what you need it, and then you can kind of revolve and move along because it just expands your awareness either way.
Absolutely. So I'd love to get into mothers and star seeds. Um, I'd love if you could give an overview. For me, I never heard of starseeds before my spiritual journey, and I feel like lately I've been seeing them a lot on Instagram. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember the Instagram handle, but this mother is a psychic and her son is a starseed, and he just spits out this knowledge that you'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, how can this little boy just spit out this knowledge from the other side, from, higher source? So I'd love if you could go into that because I think that's super fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so star seeds as a whole, right? I'm a star seed, right? It's like we as adults can be star seeds and we can have children that are star seeds. And it's not that they are any more or less of a being, right? It's like some people are like, oh, I'm just from Earth. And I'm like, do you know how incredible that is? If you are like a true OG Earthling, like that's potent as heck. Like that's amazing. But in the realm of star seeds, it's very simply that you are a soul who has had past experiences on other planets and that your place of origin isn't Earth,
Okay.
right? So it's kind of like we have past lives, which even some Earthlings have lives on other planets, but a star seed maybe originated from the Orion constellation or the Lyran constellation, and that was where their soul took its first roots and then like gained more of their experiences in that way, so they carry a lot of those traits. And there's even, you can type your star seed and then look at the traits and you're kind of like, whoa, I thought astrology was crazy or human design. You're like, look at that. You're like, here's another level of understanding your personality. It's like, go dig into your star seed type. Like that's,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And then we have a huge wave of children who are coming through that are star seeds. And really like the term star seed is really like umbrellaed under light worker. So you can be a light
Okay.
worker where you bring new frequency, you bring light into the darkness, and really like that dawning of the new era is part of starseeds fall into light workers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, that's just a lot to unpack. I mean,
Yeah.
to really think about, you know, as a society, we always talk about Earth, Earth, Earth. And yes, there's other planets, but we don't really talk about them at all. There's always dabbles of aliens and things like that, but this just sounds so profound that these star seeds are coming from other planets and helping the collective,
Mhm.
essentially, right?
Yeah. Yep. It's like there's some schools of thought that believe that the star seeds are hearing the cries of Mother Earth, and then they're like volunteers, right? It's like a volunteer's tribute. It's like we'll go to Earth and we
Hmm.
will help raise that collective. We will start to wake people up, because just like that Instagram profile with that the mother and that son, you're like, how is this 5-year old, 3-year old? I forget how old that kiddo is. You're like, how are they
Yeah.
so connected to this super divine wisdom? You're like, what? You know,
Hmm.
and then and that's not like they have to, but when they do, when they're in their pure channel, you're like, whoa, like that's a whole frequency in and of itself. And that will raise the frequency of our planet.
Yeah. I mean, when I watch him on Instagram, I literally stop. Like, all it takes is for me to see him. So it usually starts out with the mother, and then the mother will ask him questions. And I'll stop and I will listen. Sometimes I'll listen a couple times because it's so divine. It's pure
Mm-hmm.
channel. And for me, I can just feel that vibration. Like it's just so high vibrational. And then it's just sometimes I feel like it's not even him speaking. Like I really feel like it's like a full channel through.
Full channel. Yeah. And I do see a lot of children who have very strong activated channels, which which these are kind of like if you want like the characteristics of a starseed child, it really pegs to why they are so different. It's like people are like, how do I know if I have a starseed, or how do
Yeah.
they're just a normal, it's like they are normal kids. They're not going to have blue glowing eyes, right? At least in this realm, they don't have blue glowing eyes, but they are like a very different frequency. So it's kind of like you see them on the playground and maybe you're the mother of them, right? And you're like, my kid is just different. And it's the most annoying way to describe something where you're like, it's just different. But they
Yeah.
really have, like you pegged, like a frequency where you're like, you pull me in, there's a curiosity. And then for a lot of these mothers who have these starseed kids, like the normal earthly things don't seem to work on them. They don't really understand time. They don't really get why we like do certain things, or even like different healing modalities. Like they really require more of this energetic, somatic, spiritual healing versus like just giving Tylenol or something, right? They're like, I want the homeopathic. Like you see their energy being respond differently to more holistic approaches, which is just super interesting. But it's all coming down to frequency, is what I've seen. But
Yeah. And, for these children that are so high frequency, they must be children too. Like they can't always be this channel. I mean, they have to,
mhm.
explore what being an Earth child is like, right?
Yes, and it's actually a crucial part, which I do see some, or maybe a big majority of like the adult starseed communities where they almost reject their humanity. We're like, I'm a starseed, I'm here to change this planet and forget being human. But that's a whole piece of the puzzle. We get to be that conduit in our meat suit, right? In our
Yeah.
human flesh, and we have to embody both, or you never get to like fully touch down. And being ungrounded as a starseed is very frenetic, and you could say dangerous because you're more susceptible to different energies, but it's also just not sustainable. So you see these kids who are very ungrounded, they're high sensory, they're super emotional, they're like literally jumping off the walls, and you're like, no, they didn't have six cupcakes, they're just this hyper. You're like, I don't know what's happening. And you're like, oh, we need to ground, which is where they respond really well to earthing, grounding, nature,
Mm,
forests, like whatever you can get them into. Be like, oh, whoa, look, oh, you touched down. Like my
yeah.
oldest son, he's now 6, but we used to joke because he is still the hardest person to keep grounded. But I used to joke he'd have Earth days and then space days. And I'm like, you need Earth
Um,
days, buddy. So ungrounded. And he's like, no, I just want to be in space all the time. And I'm like, you have to come into your body, buddy. Like we can't, and some of us in our upbringing, it's like we've had maybe traumatic experiences where we want to dissociate from the body. But I'm
yeah.
like, you are 4 at the time. I was like, why are you dissociating? Granted, our previous house was a little traumatic in a spiritual sense, but also like you got to be in your body or you can't complete your mission. Not fully.
So speaking of missions, do starseeds have the choice to follow their mission?
Yeah, I mean, it's free will.
It's still free
So,
will? Okay.
yep, and you still come through and forget everything. So, a good majority forget why they're even here. And the other kind of irony around missions is really our purpose and mission first and foremost is to be and exist purely for being and existing,
Mm.
because that frequency will raise the collective. And a lot of us get really stuck in these like boxy details of like, what am I supposed to do and how am I supposed to do it? And then spirit's like, any which way, because you being you is what does it. And so you kind of,
Mm.
but you always have free will, because there's always like a beautiful way that spirit will pave in a lesson or pave in the way it's supposed to go. You're just like, oh, I see what happened here.
That's beautiful. So how do you differentiate a star seed from, let's say, just a regular energy healer, just a quote unquote normal person?
Yeah. So in like the psychic realm, or kind of in like an intuitive, when you're doing a reading on someone, you're going to have, at least this is how I experience it, but just different either sensory things. It depends on how you use your clair abilities, if that's how people tap into it. But you're going to like see different colors of their whole energy, right? And not
Mm,
necessarily like a soul color, like levels of soul. But you're like, whoa, this is just different. And it will almost feel like space or feel cosmic or feel like it's kind of like usually with my very earthly people, they're grounded, they're rooty, there's trees, I can almost like smell the earth, and it's like my indication of like, whoa, you are like from the crust of the earth. And then we look, are you a Garthan? Are you like OG crystal network earth
uh,
star seed, which is a star seed? Or are you, surface indigenous origin? And then we go from there. But typically it's kind of like the starseed child where you're like, there's something here. And then depending on your intuitive abilities, you kind of just keep following that breadcrumb, and you're like, oh, now I see a spaceship, or now I feel, or I see the Star Wars lights or whatever that is. But that's typically how they've come through for me in readings, where I'm like, oh, I totally get this. And truthfully, I had probably mostly star seeds when I first started reading people, so I didn't even notice that it was
wow.
anything not normal until all of a sudden I started getting some earthlings interested, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, not everybody sees this? Like, oh, okay, little naivete, right? But I'm like, oh, but I definitely have a strong calling and resonance for starseeds, so it makes sense that I see more of them in my field. I'm like, I already know how to work with you. I know exactly what to bring in for you to have a better experience here on this planet. Whereas the earthlings, I'm like,
Wow.
oh, I have a lot to learn from you.
Wow. And you mentioned that your oldest is a star seed as well. Is your others star seeds too?
Both of them
Both?
are. Mhm. Yeah,
That's
and very
amazing.
different. They're different star seeds, and they're different star seeds, different astrology, which is common, and very different human designs. Like they could not be more opposite.
Wow.
And so it's just really interesting the way that I get to, I want to say have to, but get to communicate with them, get to parent them, get to really like nourish and foster their beingness, because they're so different. I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, so it's kind of fun and special. I'm like, oh, like not surprised I have two of them, but also like, I have two of them.
Um, are star seeds only with like psychic moms, or can star seeds be with, okay,
I mean, I'll say, I guess as a whole, like I do believe that most people are far more intuitive and have abilities. They just have shut them off or closed them off so tightly.
I totally
But
agree.
I see a lot of star seeds coming in with some of these lesser aware mothers or parents to kind of segue their spiritual awakening. So I've had mothers on the other
Oh,
side of the Zoom screen, and they're like, I have no idea what chakras are. I have no idea. Like, I maybe believe in past lives, but they're like, my friend told me to come because I don't understand my kid. And then I'm just like, whoa, like you can see their lineage, you can see all the things. I'm like, I see why you don't have your connection with this. Like, we can work on that. And boom, your child's here to blow that lineage out of the water and really heal those patterns, those projections, the beliefs that got carried through that stopped the wisdom or psychic ability or intuition, or however, the connection to source from that line. Like, boom, they are here to wake everybody up.
wow. I mean, that's amazing because, like you
Yeah.
said, not everybody has opened their gift yet. Strong believer that everybody's got all four clairs, everybody's got intuitive gifts. They just choose to open the box or not open the box.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that star seeds are coming to help, you know, open those mothers that, have those gifts down there and they're just not ready to open them up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's always like it's in such divine timing. It's always so beautiful. Or they have
Mm,
multiple kids and it's the last one that's the star seed, right? It's like we primed you to be a
yeah.
mom, And now we're going to be like the different one where they're like, why isn't this working? Why? It's like, oh, they're just a starseed. That's all. Like, nothing's wrong with them. They're just a starseed, right? And that's the other thing too. It's like there's nothing wrong with this child. You're like, diagnostically, like we're not worried. We're not going into the doctor trying to figure out. You're just like, there's just something like different, but not like different, right? You're like, I don't know. Like this is crazy.
I'd love to go into different types of SARS seeds because I feel like spiritual healers, there's going to be different types. Can you go into
Mhm.
that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Okay. We'll maybe do like a top like four or five. So
Yeah.
a lot of people know about like the Pleiadians. So they're kind of
Okay.
humanoid, right? They kind of look like humans, but they're all blue typically. They generally are pretty benevolent. So within any, you have benevolent, good, malevolent, bad, right? Right? Like with anything, just like humans, right? You're like, do we have good Americans and bad Americans? Do we have good Chinese, bad Chinese, good Germans, bad Germans, right? It's like the same thing among different races of starseeds. So as a whole, I always like to caveat that. Um, this doesn't mean if you have a Pleiadian in your bedroom that you should just welcome them on in. But generally speaking, they're pretty good, right? Like they're pretty decent. They really care about what happens on Earth because they're very close to Earth. Their constellation is very, very close. So if Earth falls, they're next. So they really, really care. Then
Mm,
you have what's a good one to go to next? You have like the Lyran star seeds. So this is going to be your like lion type or feline type typically. Um, they they'll show up very like majestic royalty, like for any of the healers on here. If you get that in, you're like, I saw a cat or I saw a lion or I saw like
right.
typically you're like, well, you have some Lyran traits or you've been there in a recent lifetime. And you can just ask, is this a lifetime or is this like your origin? And you just get to kind of get the um analogy there. They're typically benevolent as well. I really like working with the Lyrans. Um, Avians, I'm an avian, I'm a blue avian, not very common. So, like, you may or may not see them.
Mm.
We're very close tied with the Lyrans. And we don't really have a home because it got destroyed in some of the wars and all of
Oh,
that. But
wow.
we don't, the avians, like, we don't really get involved very much. We're very much like a bird's eye view, which is funny because we're birds typically. It's like, okay, here we are. And we're like surveying and really helping from afar, but we've started to incarnate a lot more because we can just see like the disruption that's happening. Like, okay, it's time to send in the big dogs. Here we come. And in the, like galactic lineage or history, like there isn't necessarily like a hierarchy. So it's like if you're Pleiadian versus Lyran versus or whatever it is, right? If you're from Orion, if you're from here, that doesn't make you better or worse. It just is simply where you're from. They actually laugh
Mm,
at us a lot on Earth that we have such hierarchical systems. They're like, why do you do that? You have such a hive mentality that doesn't make sense. Right?
yeah.
Two of the groups that are typically more put in a bad rap, so more malevolent, are your grays, which we see a lot of, right? That's who those are kind of like super skinny bodies, giant heads. It's what we see depicted a
Okay.
lot in the movies. We're like, oh
Mm,
yeah, gray alien. You think of an alien, the emoji of an alien, you're like, that's a gray. There are many different types of grays. Like they are not just one singular, but they are very, very skillful at abductions and experiments. They're very, very driven on experiments and timelines. So you see them kind of in a lot of shifty business a lot of the time, but it doesn't mean they're all bad. It just means at large, their group has their hands in many, many, many different places.
makes
Um,
sense.
I've had many interesting experiences with them. Another more malevolent group, again, not at large, but mainly, is the reptilian or the draconian. So these are like reptoid. They look like alligators, but they're very
Mm,
like alpha, militant. They're also hive mentality, so are the grays. And they're very much like world domination, typically. They go from planet to planet to planet and just kind of cycle through them. Any other ones that I should mention? There's so many. Oh, Syrian are very, very common. That's what my youngest is. He's a Syrian. And they're like typically bald headed, big golden robes, or um like whale like, kind of like your deep aquatic type creatures. So it depends
Oh,
on which constellation in the Syrian, which planet you come from. But yeah, those are kind of just a few. But there are so many, and then so many nuances within them. But surface level, those are a couple.
amazing. And then you were talking earlier about how their astrology and their human design also impacts their star seed as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. It can, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I have I don't know it. I'm not an astrologer, but there is a whole thing called like galactic astrology, and you can look, and one of my friends is an astrologer, and we've been like just trying to peg down the dates of like, if I look at all my clients and I figure out birthdays, can we peg which? Basically it all comes down to, I believe it's comets. I think it's comets or asteroids. I can't remember which one, but you can
Mhm.
peg based on your natal chart which comet was passing, what starseed origin you might be. So then we've been like,
Wow.
take my intuitive notes and take the astrology and see if it matches, because that would be really, really fun. But you can kind of see through someone's astrology, perhaps where you're from, or at the very least where you've had past life experiences. Maybe that's your most recent incarnation, or something of that, if you've come in on that planet or on that comet rather.
That's amazing. I,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
so
such a rabbit hole.
fascinated. I am just so fascinated. I've always kind of like thought about aliens, but I was like, that doesn't resonate. But Starseed is totally resonating right now. Like
Mm-hmm,
I can totally feel it more. But it makes sense when you were saying like the grays look like the movies because, you
mm-hmm,
know, movies aren't, I believe, Owen aren't always made up. There's got to be some kind of
mm-hmm.
nudge from above, or I don't know how to put it into words, but you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
have these alien movies to really try to represent, it doesn't represent all of the star seeds, but in
Mm-hmm.
some kind of form.
Yeah, and I feel that there's a lot of disclosure that happens in our movies that we believe just to be movies, right? We believe them to be sci-fi, we believe them to be
Yeah.
whatever accounts, whatever things, and it's actually a part of, there's like a greater kind of governance of like all that is galactic and cosmic, which is like it'd be the Galactic Federation of Light, which is like a UN for all of the greater galactic things. And they have a rule, like a universal law, that you have to disclose what you're going to do. So there's a lot of like, is
Mm,
there disclosure that happens in movies, because it's like, hey, this is happening, but like we're going to tell you in this much truth and this much fabrication, this much truth, this much fabrication, right? Where you're like, there's a little
yeah.
bit and then there's a lot, and then you're kind of like, oh. And even with my two kiddos, they're 6 and 3, watching some of their kid shows or some of the newer kid shows where I'm like, they're already talking about aliens in like a 3-year-old level show. I'm like, are they priming them for bigger disclosure? Perhaps, but I'm just like, that's curious as a mother who's like very tapped into other networks and
Yeah.
realms. I'm like, oh, like maybe it's not our generation, it's theirs, or it'll happen at some point therein that, and there's been a lot of movement in like disclosing that we do have UFOs on footage and there are possible life forms on other planets, and all of that, where you're like, okay, this isn't that far fetched.
Right, right.
Yeah, but they don't
It's
have to be
amazing.
scary, which is the difference between like a starseed and like an alien, right? Or even like an
Yeah.
extraterrestrial. You're like, oh, they're not all just here to eat our brains or something like that, right? Like, they actually care a lot about us. They're just kind of waiting for us to figure out how to get along first, because we as humans, the same race, cannot get
Yeah.
along. Like, they aren't going to introduce a whole new race to our existence until we figure that out.
And I feel like that, as you said, they have to come to Earth and be in a human body, because if they came in just as they are, I don't know how well that would work out. Like, like when the first thing I always think of is, Star Wars or those kind of sci-fi movies. Like if they came as they are, I feel like our, humanity would just be like, what? Like,
Yeah, and really you can't like accept new beings if you're not like on a level of receptivity for it.
right.
Even like a frequency plane, right? If you think of different realms or different dimensions, and there's a belief that all realms and dimensions exist right here on Earth, we just don't have the frequency or perception to receive them. And then all of a sudden you kind of turn your radar on, which is what happens to a lot of us in our spiritual awakening. All of a sudden the whole world becomes a lot bigger. And you're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is all right here. I used to walk this park every day. I never noticed those spirits. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Mhm.
whoa. Right. And so same thing with
Yeah.
that, where you're like, yeah, you can't have some blue alien with weird tentacles here and things. You're like, I'm just shopping at Whole Foods, right? What is going on here? That, that throws our whole nervous system. Like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
My gosh, I love this conversation. I'd love if you could give like possible client examples without breaking confidentiality of mothers and starseeds.
Mm, yeah. So I'll share some that I know I have permission to like share their like
Okay.
testimonials or share some of their story with. But some of them, let's see, just trying to think of one. Mm, so an interesting thing. So in one of my sessions, it's the intuitive child codes session, but inside of this session, I look at a child's environment. So I'm like, is their environment suitable for their basically cosmic blueprint? Like, is their soul and their being happy where they are and what needs to shift if not? And one of them was having really bad you could call them night terrors or like spiritual experiences, right? Like I don't really believe they're
Mhm.
night terrors. I think they're actually spiritual experiences while they were sleeping, different from bad dreams, right? We kind of all know the difference of those two. And the child inside of this reading was like, my bed is in the wrong spot. Like you need to tell my mom to move my bed. And like we're like, really? Like this seems so simple. And so I was like, okay, like I have no idea the layout of this person's house. I've never met them in person, like any of the things. I'm like, you have to move their bed to the east where their head can face the east and that's up against a wall and put a thing on this night, blah, 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 blah. Like a few different things to change in their room. And within 2 nights, sleeping through the night, and this I think pretty sure he was like 3.5 or 4, sleeping through the night and not having night terrors because he
Wow.
told me to switch room. But it's all in really I look at a lot of I love feng shui, but I'm by no means a feng shui consultant. But these children will tell me about it in these sessions. Um, so that one's like such a funny one where I'm like, oh yeah, like I do always look at their bedroom, their school, even like
Mm.
the layout of a house. I'm like, what do you need if they ask for? I'm like, what do you need shifted here? But that was a really funny one where I was like, we're here to talk about spiritual things. Like, why are we talking about your bed? Like, okay. What else? Another one had like it was the mother's grandpa. Like they had like medium abilities and like
Mhm.
they were trying to relay messages, but were too scared for it. And so it's kind of like how do we,
Mm.
like if they're that telephone, they're that medium, and
Yeah.
they don't know it, but the mother needs to know something. It was like how can we create, so one, I helped relay those messages to the mother, but then it was like if this is going to be a continual thing, what are safe practices we can use for those two moving forward so that the child feels like they're not spooked and they can bring it to the mother, right? So it's like kind of like safe
Yeah.
space. We're talking about like what messages did you get in your dream, and keeping it super neutral. You're not prying, just
Right.
like super neutral. And boom, the messages are relayed. And then the child's sleeping better, not getting spooked. A lot of sleep issues are why people come to me, which really does, it seems to be like one without the other. You can't find them. Like a starseed
Yeah.
without sleep issues is very uncommon. Yeah.
Wow.
I've also had, this one was funny too. One of this gal came to me because her child had, well, big behavioral episodes, but then would tell her in these behavioral episodes, like, you're not even my real family. You're not even my mom. This isn't even my whatever. And
Wow.
what we got to the bottom of inside of it, and I do believe this one resolved. I'd have to like go ask her and whatever. But I know she's allowed me to share this part. But it was that she is so closely connected to her galactic family that on a human level, this is again where I talked about like that rejecting of your humanity. Like you see
Yeah.
it in even these young ones where it's like, I'm your earthly mom. So like I get to take care
Mhm.
of you while you're here on earth. And when you sleep, like you can go visit your other mom, like you can, and of course, ensuring that it's safe, ensuring they know their sovereignty, like really taking your spiritual protection seriously. You're not just gonna like let your kiddos go with anybody, even in a spiritual way. But that one was super interesting, where they were just like, "You're not my real mom. Like, I'm not even from here." And they're like, "What? Like, I birthed you, babe. Like, you're mine. I know you're mine." And they're like, "No, like neutral as ever, just like, sorry, mom, you're not." Like,
Oh my
what?
gosh. Like, what do you say to that? You just be like, that is like from a movie or something where you're just like, no,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
And some of it's like for us as the parent or the caregivers or givers, it's like to really understand their soul's perspective, and then also
Right.
for them to understand their earthly experience and to fully be here. So even my 6-year-old, again, like I always talk about him, but sometimes I'm like, he wouldn't follow things for the longest of time, and then I shifted my language to say, on earth we put our shoes on before we go
Oh,
into the store. And he's like, "Oh, it's an earth thing, okay." And then he would do it, and I'm like, "What?" Like, but he didn't get it, and he didn't have the full circle knowing about it until I was like,
yeah.
this is an earth thing, we have to sleep. This is an earth thing, we have to this. And he's like, check, okay, that's part of my earth job, fine. And it's like such random stuff. But you're
Wow.
like, who knew we'd be having these conversations with our children? Like, not me.
I mean, children are so, I believe, are so intuitive until they forget, but these star scenes are on another level that I've
It's
never heard
a whole new
before.
Yeah. And that's why you can almost peg them when you're like at a playground, you're in a gymnasium, you're wherever, you're just like, whoa, like there's just something, right? You're just like, that
Yeah,
kiddo. Oh, like because they're just whole new
they're just
level.
so different.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna have to like open my senses up now when I'm around children. Not to be like in a weird way, but just to like,
Yeah.
you know,
Try it and let me know how it goes. Cause
oh, I might.
yeah, they have such
Um,
codes. Like just like that kiddo where you're like, sometimes I watch it 3 times. Same thing with these
yeah,
children, right? Like we're all beings, but these children, and they come through and you're just like, whoa, their eyes, or whoa, like, why did that little girl look at me? And you're like, oh, okay, thank you, frequency received, right? And you're like, not creepy. It's just like genuine, normal human being interactions, but something about that interaction just felt different. Like, oh,
yeah.
starseed, starseed, starseed. Okay.
I'm gonna have to keep my senses open now.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk about your sessions. If you haven't been on her website, she's got, I want to say like 8 different types of sessions, which,
And
by the way, I think is fabulous because not one session fits all.
hmm
So, because you do so many different things. You're an energy healer, you're a psychic medium, you're, Starseed as well. So
hmm
we go into a little bit of what each session is. Maybe some of the listeners might want to do a session.
Yeah. So yes, I have many things. If you do ever get to my page and you're like, I don't know what to pick, just message me and tell me what you're looking for, and I can navigate you through which one, because that is one thing people are like, I want them all. Like it's okay, we can combo. But an intuitive soul reading is for you. And it's really like your soul, your chakras, your path, your purpose, like any past life healings that have to come in there, any shamanic or healing, energy healing things that need to come into that are brought into it, really guided by your higher self. Again, I'm just the conduit. I have like this beautiful blessing of being in that space with you and guiding that healing and that information transfer to you. It's really great if you are like kind of at a stuck point. That one's a really like, I'm at a sticky stuck, like either in career, relationships, even in your spiritual awakening or your gifts. You're kind of like, I learned this and now I'm like, meh. Like it's so great to remove some of those blockages inside of that one. It's typically who I come see or who I see come through that door is like the stuck or curious or stuck people. One
Mhm.
of the other ones is the intuitive child codes reading. This is for the mother, but about a child. So like the child doesn't have to be there probably until they're like maybe teens and up if it's relevant that they want to know more about their spiritual selves. Otherwise, they don't really need to be there. You, as their parent, can consent for their higher self, like for them, and then their higher self kind of clues you in, clues me in. Inside of this one, I'll go through their souls, their chakras, past lives. This is where I do like environment, nutrition, communication, and movement, and then like their spiritual stuff, where I'll look at kind of all these facets of a being to see what is like not working for them. Typically,
Mm.
people will come through again, it's like the curious or the parents who are very much struggling, where they're like, I can't get my child to sleep, or they're struggling in school, but I know that they're super intelligent. What can I do? How can I fix this? And we usually find that, or if they have really weird like sibling tension, it's a great one. I can kind of do like a little combo reading in one of those to figure out what past life do they need to play out and can we heal right now so that they could get along better. They're
Yeah.
still going to be siblings, but better as it moves forward. Um, Another one that I have in the energy healing realm is a third trimester healing. So this is for pregnant women who are typically, unless you have like a high risk pregnancy, it's more for like your end of second try into your third trimester healing, so you can remove any energetic blocks that you may have that would impact your postpartum experience and your birth. So it's really to
Wow.
open, like birth is such a spiritual experience. And I had for both of my births, like two, did I have, well, with the house clearing, I had three before my first, and then I had two clearings before my second, and it
Mhm.
shifted so much energetically for me. And so that's why I created that one to really help just open up that. I used to call it the birth portal activation, but then it sounded like you're getting people into labor, and so that's not, I didn't want people to think that. But just any healing that you may want for you on a somatic spiritual level, and then also for this unborn babe that's in there. And then I also do holistic muscle testing. So this is for your physical vessel. If you
Okay.
have skin issues, digestion issues, brain fog, you have parasites, or you live in chronic mold, like those are kind of the typical ones that I really love to work with. Or infertility is a big one I see a lot through that practice. What I love about those is I tie in not only on the physical level, what's happening. Is it parasites? Is it mold, metals,
Yeah.
chemicals? What's happening? But also I get to see the spiritual ties. So I'm like, ooh, your
Mm.
liver might be stagnant. And we're seeing that you have liver flukes, but
Mm.
it's past life pulling in here. And typically people I see they have way better results when we combine the energy healing and the supplements on the physical level. So kind of my like really long-winded, like, what do you do? But it
Yeah.
all fits. I can't seem to get rid of any of them. So
And I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
yeah, thank you.
I think, like I said earlier, there's so many healers and so many healing modalities for specific reason because every person here on Earth is so unique and has unique, things to dig up and experience. So you having 8 different types of session, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I received that.
You're so welcome. So I'd love to wrap up this episode with just a quick conclusion. So, where can people find you? So, if you have social media, your website, and what offerings do you have, paid or free?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. That's kind of my most active place to really be, at Michelle Marie Larson, kind of a long one. But I do like weekly energy kind of readings. So you'll pick like message one or two and see what your children are trying to say to you. And then sprinkled in for sure at least like once a month, I'll do like collective readings. So it's like the collective reading for September, the collective reading for October, like that. By the time this one comes out, that'll probably be more in that realm. But those are really fun and just different, like you're a spiritual practitioner, you're an energy healer, like this is what you need to know is on the Instagram. You'll put in the show notes my like booking website as well. And then yeah, so for I do a newsletter also, which you can find on my Instagram. But really the paid offers, we kind of talked about them. The only thing we didn't talk about is like long-term energy healing, which is
Oh,
for
yeah.
really like if you have deep generational healing to do, if you have entity attachments, if you have bleed throughs, like there's so many different things, you kind of funnel into a long-term client, but all of that can come through any of those readings. And as always, you get the choice to do that. And then different free things, I always come out with different like mama toolkits or different meditations that you can do. So I think my spiritual mom hack toolkit is still live. If not, I will check. But that's a
Okay.
good freebie one. I did a little like webinar on just 6 simple hacks that you can do to kind of like vamp up your spiritual mom in and support yourself with your children.
Oh, that's amazing. I feel like, did you put out a September collective?
Mm-hmm. I did.
I actually listened to that in one sitting. I usually don't have that much time, but I actually sat through it in one sitting, and I was like, "Oh, yes, I do feel that energy." I'm like, "Yep, that feels about right."
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's also nice to
Yeah.
like hear like what you're feeling energetically, others are feeling, or vice versa, and be like, "Oh, she's feeling that. I'm not feeling that," or that's what
Right.
I couldn't put my finger on. If there was
Yeah.
something that you said in the collective, and I was like, that's it. That's what I've been trying to pinpoint.
Yeah. Well, and they're just fun too. Like even sometimes even as I'm channeling them, I'm like, what? This makes no sense. And then I'm like, but I'm gonna record it because I'm just the vessel. I'm not the person who
Yeah,
gets to filter. I'm like, okay, I'll record it. And then come like the end of a month, I'll either go back and listen or I'll like catch my notes in my like journal. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh, that's what that meant. I'm like, it's so clear now, but at the beginning of the month, I was like, this is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, I have no idea what's happening, but here it goes. And then by the end of the month, you're like, oh, future proofs past. Like, here we go.
I love those aha moments every time.
Yeah, every time. Like, and still like, oh, like they just don't get old.
They don't, they really don't. And I find that spirit always likes to do it in different ways. Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially for signs for me, I'll be like, I'm asking for this sign and I don't see it. And they're like, because we gave you a different one. You don't need to see the same one.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's actually a really good point.
Oh, I always love like I tease my sister about this one a lot, but even some clients where I'm just like, oh, do you need like a signier sign? Right? Like we ask for signs and we get like a very
Yeah,
obvious sign. Like, that's not what I asked for. Or I'll ask for one more that's even bigger. And they're like, but I need even bigger, right? It's like they gave us a sign. It's very clear.
it's there.
We can do it. It's there.
Yeah, like every night before I go to bed, I'm like, thank you, God, angels, spirit, loved ones for giving me all the signs and even the ones I miss because I know 100% throughout
Mhm.
the day I'm missing some
Yeah.
signs that they're giving me. And they're like, hello, I gave you the
We're
sign.
trying.
You just didn't see it.
Ooh, I love that piece of gratitude for even the ones we don't see and things we
Yeah.
miss and just that humility in it. Like, ooh, I like that.
Yeah. It's just Like, I used to just be like, "Thank you for all the messages," but then I'm like, "But what about the messages that I'm not seeing or hearing?"
Right.
So then I just start to add that into my nightly gratitude process. Is just, "Thank you
Mm,
for the ones that I didn't see."
love that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I love this conversation. I'm a full Starseed fan now.
Thank you. Yes, I love sharing this wisdom, and I really feel like just so blessed to be a
Yeah,
channel for these starseed children where they're like, we picked you, you get to share the messages. I'm like, okay. But anytime I can speak on their behalf and really just help kind of spread that wisdom, right? Like star seed, we spread our seeds, we
yeah.
travel through life, and we get to, transmute the messages. So thank you for all that you do and all that you share with your listeners, and for creating this space. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So anyone that wants to follow Michelle, I'm going to put that all in the show notes. And we will see you next Monday. Have a great day, guys.